Hi, welcome back to Jonesy Church Wrestling. Thank you for clicking the video. We're here today to discuss last night's Monday Night Raw, joined by my regular co-host, none other from the channel SCW, Steve. Great to have you here this afternoon, Steve, to hear your in-depth opinion on Raw. How are you this afternoon?
Yeah, really good, thank you. It's great to be back on the channel as always. And like you say, we're here to talk about Monday Night Raw. So without further ado, let's get Raw.
Definitely. We're now 12 days away from Fastlane, so on the Fastlane to WrestleMania. Let's kind of get into this explosive Raw. Let's get to it then, okay?
Yeah,
so Raw opens up. There's a flashback to last week where we got a new world champion in Lashley. The show starts up and we get a fantastic kind of entrance for Lashley. But the one that's shown behind me, it was absolutely fantastic. It was really kind of eye-catching. It really sort of showed the importance of him as such. So Lashley obviously comes out. He basically comes out with MVP. And it basically says that Lashley tried to deny the inevitable, and there's going to be a rematch on this week's show, basically next. And what were your kind of thoughts on Lashley's entrance and the rematch?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we got this rematch quite early on in the show, didn't we? He seemed to have a big video package to actually show us what happened last week and how Lashley became champion. Obviously, we had a few words from Lashley as well. Softly spoken, but obviously never to mince his words. He looks like a dominant force. And yeah, The Miz, obviously, as well, having his say on things, just basically recapping what happened last week, kind of a bit of filler to start things off. But like you said, getting to that entrance, Lashley's entrance, that was there to make him look like an absolute megastar. This... Just to go another level up for him, you're presenting him as your WWE champion. And this was a nice little touch you put here because Lashley, he just looks like the man. And I mean, of course, it's something that we've wanted for a long time. It's something he expressed in his backstage words. He said he's been waiting 16 years. Far too long, far long overdue to be in this position. And now WWE are not just giving him the championship, they're presenting him like one. He looks like an unstoppable monster. And with this brand new entrance, I agree with you, fantastic, eye-catching. There's something that's a wow factor with this. So yeah, mega impressed.
Definitely. We've got the rare promo from Lashley, as you said. So the match is next behind me. We get Lashley versus Miz, WWE Championship. Really kind of quick match. It was kind of a squash match, but it did go on for 8 minutes. In the end, the obvious happened. This man got the win. Lashley got the win here. I thought it did what it needed to do. It further paints Lashley as a dominant kind of champion. Was you happy to see the rematch start up the opening episode of Raw? Was you happy they started with this match?
Yeah, well, I had a reason why I thought they were going to start this match off. And of course, we're going to touch on more of this later on in the show. But I thought with this match being first, we were building towards a WWE Championship match built for Fastlane, which, of course, spoiler alert, that didn't happen on Raw. So the fact that this was the kickoff of the show was surprising. But, of course, The Miz wasn't going to run away this week. He wanted to be in this match. He wanted to try and win the championship back. I like the strategic style of the match that The Miz tried to kind of almost wind Lashley up to lose his head. But, I mean, Lashley wasn't going to fall for these games. Looked very dominant. The delayed vertical suplex in particular looked quite impressive. I know he's used that a few times in the past. And it looked pretty impressive here. But, yeah, Lashley dominant. It was a slightly delayed squash match. But at the same time, there was never in doubt that Lashley was going to win here. And it's been actually verbally said there by the commentary team that Lashley is going to be the WWE champion going into WrestleMania. So it looks like we probably won't have a championship match at Fastlane.
Good analysis there. Yeah, it's an interesting point. The fact they haven't built a matchup is kind of unusual. But no, definitely. I don't know if it's just me. Were you getting the vibes from this that Lashley's turning babyface? I think I could see MVP kind of turning heel on him after WrestleMania. I think that's probably maybe going to happen. I really getting vibes that Lashley's going to be a babyface from kind of the way he was presented on this show so far. Well, would you agree with that or disagree?
Do you know what? Actually, I do agree a little bit. And I think it's a great point you brought up because particularly when he was talking backstage, it was a feel-good factor. He was so happy. And it wasn't like the monster Lashley we actually have seen since the Rumble. There was a different look in his eyes from that point to winning the championship. He almost went, like you said, back to like a babyface Lashley. We didn't see, arguably, I would say one thing that lacked from this match, I would have liked to have seen that intensity still from Lashley. There was no bad booking of any sorts this week from Lashley's point of view, but like you said, it did portray his babyface. Now, I don't know if that's because he was taking on The Miz, who's meant to be hated, or if it's just the fact that there could be a direction going forward. But I would say I do hope that they don't break the Hurt Business up. They've got a really good thing going on with these four. And for me, I think it's one of the highlights of Raw each and every week. And now Lashley's in this position. He's got MVP as his mouthpiece. MVP needs to stay as that, because although Lashley's nice and softly spoken, and that can work as a babyface, if he's going to remain as a heel, which perhaps it looks like with Drew he may do, MVP can do that role so much better.
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing is, I'm going to put a prediction out there, Steve. Call me crazy, but I think Money in the Bank, Lashley, if he's still champion, will be facing Keith Lee, and Keith Lee will be a heel, and Keith Lee will be managed by MVP. That's what I'm going to call it now. Would you be a fan of that happening?
I would be a fan of that happening, because of the fact that I suppose you've taken Lashley to the next level. You can then put Keith Lee and try and put him at that level. But as I said before, though, if Lashley's going to be a babyface, it's okay for him to be on his own. If he needs help with the promo work, then, I mean, MVP, he's been great for his career. To let him go now, is it too soon? I'm not so sure. But the idea of Lashley against Keith Lee, and Keith Lee at this point, when he comes back, he's going to need some sort of cutting edge and a bit of help, just like Lashley did 12 months ago. So it's not a bad idea.
Thank you. We then had this backstage segment where Drew McIntyre's there. McIntyre basically calls out Lashley, says he's a coward. Then from nowhere, Sheamus kind of attacks him. Sheamus really does a job on McIntyre. He really kind of beats him up, leaves him beaten down. It ends up with Drew kind of storming off and throwing like sort of a box. Drew ends up kind of walking backstage and continuing going backstage. He runs into Adam Pearce. He demands a no disqualification match. Was you a fan of this segment?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we had the traditional looking at the TV at the wrong angle during the match. Drew McIntyre clearly will be going for Bobby Lashley, wanted to put his focus there. I think when he was talking about these words, he was saying how Lashley didn't want to have that moment beating him. He wanted it over The Miz. And, of course, Drew beat Lesnar for an ironic name drop of Brock Lesnar, by the way. And funnily enough, just quickly, slightly off topic, but Brock Lesnar is back on WWE's roster page, and he's listed under the Raw brand. Interesting note that, because he wasn't under that before. So maybe something will be coming ahead. We don't know with that, but that's certainly, if you go on WWE.com right now under the superstars, Brock Lesnar is listed, and he's listed under Raw. But going to your point, sorry, very, very quickly then. Sheamus with the attack there on Drew, of course, building up to that match on the evening. I mean, they had a fantastic match last week on Raw. It was arguably one of the highlights of the show. So the fact that this was going to continue does give Sheamus some direction, because I was worried that that was going to be it, and that all that build was going to completely be, arguably down the toilet for a match that opened up Raw. I still want to see this match take place on pay-per-view, but the fact that a no DQ match was coming on Raw, I can't lie, I was excited about it. I thought that this was definitely going to be good when it's going to go down.
100%. This is a pay-per-view level match again. Even though we've seen it last week, I was really kind of excited to see that announcement. They really built up the intensity by sort of Drew selling for Sheamus early on. But no, moving forward, we had a Rhea Ripley vignette. She's coming soon. My kind of thoughts of that at this point, I'm kind of sick of this. They keep doing these vignettes for Rhea Ripley. She should be here already. Everybody knows who ready she is from WrestleMania last year. She was in the final two in the Women's Royal Rumble. What is with the delay? Why are they delaying it? I think it's just getting a bit boring now. What's your opinion of that?
And she's got lost.
Yeah. No, maybe she's with Aleister Black. Probably, maybe, I don't know. It's just you got to admit it's an overkill. Everyone knows who she is. She should be there now on the road to WrestleMania. And the way they're delaying the same vignette every single week with no date. I get the slow build, but we've not seen her since January. It's a bit of an overkill, isn't it?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, the thing is, there's two ways of looking at it. It's nice to try and build a bit of hype up, but like you said, we've already seen her. We know what it's all about. It's not as if it's someone brand new we've never seen before. So in some ways, I see both sides of the argument. I get what WWE's trying to do, but the more weeks that go by, the less likely Rhea Ripley's on WrestleMania. At this point, there's two places she's debuting, or actually arguably three. She could turn up at Fastlane, either the night after Fastlane, or a very bad prediction, but one that I think is most likely at this point. If this continues as it is, she could be the night after WrestleMania.
Yeah, maybe that'd be a very slow, long build, wouldn't it, if that's the case? But I'm really hoping we get Charlotte and her at WrestleMania. Maybe now can't see it. I can see Charlotte and Oscar, but they're doing a job of stalling her, that's for sure. I just hope she comes back and she's on a push. I hope she's not going to come back and be middle of the card, which she's far better than that, as we know.
Absolutely.
We then had a random backstage segment. We got Braun Strowman running into R-Truth. R-Truth basically says he needs Strowman's help to win the 24/7 title. R-Truth then basically reads out a list of apologies. Strowman said he doesn't need an apology from him. He needs it from Shane McMahon. And then Braun kind of walks off. For me, this was a comedic segment. Braun, it further plays up that Braun's an idiot with kind of the theme of the show, really. And I think messing with R-Truth, it just kind of was a waste of time, really. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I hated it. I think I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, okay, let's move forward. Okay. We then obviously had Braun Strowman backstage. Braun Strowman wondered what's been happening with Shane McMahon. He basically complained about numerous things that have gone wrong, a plethora of complaints. It ends up with Strowman saying that he warned Shane that not to mock him. He basically demands that Shane McMahon comes out. Shane McMahon comes out, and it then ends up looking at Braun in the face. He says he apologizes. He then leaves the ring. Kind of a very kind of needless segment. They're obviously building up this match for WrestleMania, as we said on previous weeks of the podcast. It's just a filler for me. I know we're going to get this later on the show again, but by the time it ended, I just thought I've wasted 5 minutes. What's your thoughts, mate?
Yeah, kind of really. Like you say, you've hit the nail on the head there. We know where it's leading to, but at the moment, I mean, it was just filler, wasn't it?
Do you think, I'm going to put this out there now, this is obviously a show this week full of suggestions. Do you think we're going to get some sort of school spelling bee match at WrestleMania or something? Because they're obviously going to put them in some sort of gimmick to try and protect them. It's just the whole thing about intelligence and stuff like that. It's this match for me, it's not WrestleMania, whether it's just such a mismatch. We've got Shane McMahon turning heel, Braun's a face with no announcement. It's just not even been organized properly. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, of course, Braun sort of came back as a babyface going into the Royal Rumble, but arguably was meant to be a babyface when he left, even though he kind of headbutted Adam Pearce's. There has been a disconnect of what they've been doing, Braun Strowman, over the last 12 months. He's been face and heel more times than the Big Show during his sort of runs in WWE, and of course, probably a taboo name to mention at the moment. But anyway, looking at it, yeah, it's just the whole thing. I mean, Shane McMahon was a babyface last week, getting the Miz to defend the championship twice, so they have to reestablish him as the heel in here, but he was heel with Braun in the show. It just is a bit of a cluster. It just doesn't really work at the moment. And I'm going to say it now because I was going to say this later on. We were going to talk about when they meet again later in the ring. But there was a nice, easy way you could have done a storyline with these two. And I really think that they've gone down a completely stupid way that just doesn't make any sense at all. Shane McMahon's reason to have problems in picking on Braun Strowman should be to the fact that Braun Strowman came and destroyed what was Raw Underground. He had his toy. He had his little sort of beat up club. He was establishing, building new stars that were going to go on Raw. Then Braun Strowman had to turn up from SmackDown every single week into Raw Underground instead and beat up everybody that was in Raw Underground, including his prized possession that was Dabba Kato. That could bring him back to TV. It just would have some sense in building and making a match. Now, I'm not suggesting WrestleMania should have been a Raw Underground match. Now, don't get me twisted on that. But then you can go into the gimmick matches that you're used to seeing with Shane McMahon. We used to know DQ matches, street fights. That's the sort of stuff that Shane McMahon does at WrestleMania. And we won't get a clean one-on-one match, I wouldn't assume, with him and Braun. So that would be a clever way to bring around the toys. And rather than like Underground, it could just be of that theme, but actually in WrestleMania, in ring with a 1, 2, 3. It would have made a lot more sense to me.
I guess it would kind of be like a Lions Den match a bit, wouldn't it? That would be kind of the match they'd probably do. But no, great suggestion. Really, really good point, Steve. I think clearly going into this WrestleMania match, I can see Shane having a hired hand that does the match for him or he teams with him. But let's move forward. We're going to have to discuss these again later. So let's move forward. We then obviously had probably match of the night. Going to go to this now. It was the fantastic Sheamus versus Drew McIntyre match. And for me, this was absolutely superb. No disqualification. Both wrestlers really kind of took lumps out of each other. You can tell they were really going for it hard. In the end, it ended up with kind of a no contest. Obviously, it's not very often in a no disqualification we get a no contest, but both wrestlers kind of knocked each other out with the steps behind me. And it, I was just really, really superb. I know we've seen this match a few times, but let's have this match on pay-per-view again, 100%. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, it was a fantastic match. It was really built very well. Went for a couple of ad breaks. The toys came out very quickly, got violent. As you can see behind you, George, yes, it was a very sort of creative way to finish the match. I'm not sure who puts their heads in between those steps before they run into each other. I do feel Drew's reaction was a bit over theatrical. I will give that as a slight nitpick. But, I mean, you could see from the camera angles, they focused on Sheamus falling to the ground every time since it looked a lot more realistic of how it would be when you're running to each other. But looking at it, no, I think this was protecting both guys. This now needs to go into pay-per-view. They can either do the same stipulation again, or it could even work to last man standing. That could potentially be a good stipulation to do as well. This needs to be put on the Fastlane. They've done great work, great chemistry, and it deserves a pay-per-view match. It really does.
Definitely. I think if I was booking this, I'd book this in a 3 Stages of Hell match at Fastlane. Would you be a fan of seeing that type of match with these two?
Yeah, I mean, that would work really, really well because we're not seeing those for a long time. In fact, NXT was the last brand to have that with Johnny Gargano and Adam Cole a couple of years ago. But for a Three Stages of Hell, I think that works really well. You could have the singles, no DQ, and then, like you say, perhaps like a steel cage or something. It would fill the time out because there's not many matches been announced for Fastlane. So this would give the show a bit of purpose. And this one match that would technically be free could fill up about half an hour, 40 minutes of the show. So that would be a good way to fill up some time.
Have you got anything else you want to add before we move forward?
No, I'm set to go forward.
Okay, so moving forward, we had a backstage segment where we got AJ Styles and Omos interviewed by the newest WWE staff, Kevin Patrick. It ends up kind of with AJ Styles basically taunting Randy Orton. Randy Orton appears. This ends up with them two squabbling. It's going to be the main event tonight, so they kind of put the main event. I kind of enjoyed this segment. I thought AJ Styles was really funny, some of the comments he came out with. And I think it was a really fun kind of segment. And I think it just shows Randy's kind of losing his mind. What were your thoughts of the segment?
Yeah, it was okay. I didn't mind this one too much. I just like the fact that AJ Styles was poking fun at Randy Orton, but actually sort of saying that it's kind of ridiculous. It's kind of almost saying what we're thinking. It's almost as if AJ, they used him as the role was like, we know the audience probably doesn't like this, but we're still going ahead with it anyway. But it was a fun way to build up the main event for the later of the evening. But of course, there's a lot of heel heavy stuff here. I mean, Lashley versus Miz is going to be heel versus heel. Same with AJ and Orton. Where are the baby faces at?
Yeah, they're obviously not here. There was no Damian Priest this week on the show, no Keith Lee. As I said, there was quite a few people missing, but I think it's a great main event. I know we saw it previously back in 2019 stuff, but I was excited to see this match, even if I knew the finish would be a bit fishy at the end. But kind of moving forward, then we've obviously got an announcement that next week we'd get the Hurt Business defending the tag team titles against the New Day. This leads to a singles match: Xavier Woods versus Shelton Benjamin. This was a solid match. It did what it needed to kind of do. I kind of enjoyed it for the time they had. Obviously, you're getting Xavier Woods getting the pinfall. Normally, I'm not a fan of tag team champions getting pinned, but I think it's great to give the challengers a win because I think you really want to have them higher going into this match next week. What was your thoughts on the match?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a standard. You want to build up your tag team title match next week so the challengers get a bit of momentum going in. Sometimes that can be a detriment when it comes to the championship match itself. It felt like that this was going to be the WrestleMania match because they've got no other teams clearly built for Raw at the moment. So I'm kind of surprised we're getting it now. But no, the match was quite enjoyable. And a little shout out to the ring gear for New Day as well. It looked like almost a bit like a Mortal Kombat thing with a Sub-Zero and Scorpion kind of look vibe going on. So yeah, I was digging that.
Glacier's coming back, is he? Well, yeah, no, never mind. Yeah, no, nice analysis. There we go. But we obviously had this match between Riddle and we then had this announcement that there was going to be a match between Riddle and Ali next week for the United States title. This leads to Riddle defending his title against Slapjack. So this match, obviously, here I've got to go to what happened before. Riddle's backstage. He's on his scooter. He ends up sort of getting more stressed out about where his scooter is than his up-and-coming United States title match. For me, this is a joke. This is exactly why the Riddle character is not getting anywhere. Although he's the United States champion, fantastic in the ring, but this gimmick is killing him, man. I think the focus of the scooter is blatantly going to happen that Ali's going to kidnap the scooter, and it'll be like Shotzi Blackheart with a tank again. It'll be the same crap that we saw a few weeks ago on NXT, in my opinion. I'm really not a fan of this. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of scooter stuff. It's almost as if this was actually designed to kids. It's like, there's a thing called a scooter in this world. Yeah. It's like everyone's getting hyped up as if they've never seen one before. Yeah, for me, this backstage segment really didn't work. And like you say, everything about Riddle there, spot on. In the ring, it's fantastic. But backstage, what they're doing with him, it's week after week. I must sound like a parrot, but I really am not a fan of the way that they're booking this character.
I think it's just the intensity that he's more focused about and concerned about the welfare of the scooter than the United States title defense. I just think your United States title isn't a prop. It's a title that means something. Lashley had it for so long last year, and they built up such a good prestige to it. Whereas if you've got sort of Riddle there joking about every single week, it just it doesn't really excite me. But have you got anything else you want to add before we get to the match?
Well, I mean, I suppose, yeah. I mean, Lashley really gave that title some meaning, didn't he? So yeah. I just want to say I agree with that. Yeah, if anything, he outgrew that championship. He needed to be away from there sooner because it feels now at least we have got a mid-card division in WWE once again because we were lacking that on the Raw side. It felt no one was near Lashley's level to try and even take the mid-card title. So the fact it's come down a little bit, I think, is actually a benefit to a lot of people in that area of the card. But I do agree with you that title will lose meaning very quickly if Riddle keeps being a joke every single week.
100%. So we got this match, Riddle versus Slapjack, Mustafa Ali at ringside. This was okay. It didn't get very long. Riddle obviously picked the win up after the bro Derek slam. For me, this was kind of filler. Ali obviously loses it after the match with Slapjack. It just does what it needs. I think there's holes with this. So the problem I have with it is there's no rest of retribution. There's no explanation where they are. They're meant to be stable. They should be there at ringside, I think. And it just filler for me. I really hope next week we're going to see Ali win the belt, but I can't see it. What's your thoughts on the match and the prediction for next week, Steve?
Yeah, for the time they had, I thought the match was pretty decent. I agree that where were the rest of Retribution, but this seems to happen week on week that we get just random members turn out. This not as often we get the whole group a lot of the time, but I imagine they'll all be in house next week for Ali when he wants to try and win that United States Championship. I'm very much looking forward to that championship match, but again, I'm surprised it's not on Fastlane.
I think you made some excellent points. So going back on your point then, very surprised it's not on Fastlane, 100%. I would have thought it was a Fastlane match. We obviously had this match last week and it was absolutely superb. I'm really looking forward to it next week. My prediction, putting it out there now, I think Retribution are going to turn on Ali and cost him the belt. That's what I personally think is probably going to happen. It would make sense to end this storyline, and I think that's the way to do it. What's your thoughts of that?
I'd love it if that happened. I think it's a great suggestion. I honestly don't see where you can go with Retribution anymore. I think I spoke about this actually this week on the Q&A, where I think Mustafa Ali can still continue the Retribution feeling and vibe on his own. He doesn't necessarily need this group because they keep letting him down. Maybe he'll feel that, if you want to get a job done right, you've got to do it yourself. And like you said, if these guys will turn on him, maybe there's a chance they can save their careers, arguably, because, they can come back as their normal characters. Some will probably be on Raw, some maybe on NXT or main event, but there's a spot on the roster for them. But I would say that the Retribution have tried hard with this gimmick, but they've just not been given the right push and direction. But no, I think it's a good prediction you make for next week, and I can't see Riddle losing that championship just yet.
No, I can't. So moving kind of forward, we obviously had the Shane McMahon, Braun Strowman segment. This kind of leads with them sort of carrying on what started earlier, and it just kind of ends up with sort of Shane McMahon and Braun kind of squabbling. It does end up with kind of Shane McMahon kind of teasing Braun. It then ends up with kind of Shane McMahon laughing at him. Shane McMahon kind of just implies that Braun Strowman's stupid. It was a bit like a teacher to a child almost. It was just really, really kind of boring. It went on and on. And it just kind of didn't really work because it appeared that Shane McMahon didn't really remember his lines and stuff. And it just kind of just was so childish and boring. I can't believe this is a WrestleMania match. What was your thoughts of this segment?
Didn't this segment go on for like 10 minutes where Shane McMahon literally could not get his words out, and he was meant to do this apparently. This is the funny part. Reports come out today, this segment went exactly how it was meant to. But I mean, Shane McMahon, his acting skills here show clearly he's not an actor. This wasn't portrayed very well. This was just awkward. It was like, it felt like watching for 3 hours just this segment alone. It really is awful build for the WrestleMania match. And the fact is as well, Shane McMahon eventually managed to get some sort of line out where Braun Strowman chases him to the back. Shane McMahon is meant to have escaped in a car, which is to Braun's site. Braun sort of then goes, well, I'm not going to get him, so I'll go to the back. Shane turns up again, sort of like last, and then actually calls him stupid. I mean, look, it's just like you say, it's something that you'd see in kindergarten, isn't it? It's a very sort of like school playground kind of mentality. It's just, it's not for me, this at all. It's one of the worst storylines in WWE. And like I say, there are alternative ways that you could book this. As I said earlier, as a potential Raw Underground theme could have been used here for the WrestleMania match. But instead, we're going down this, and it's very painful to watch.
Have you got anything else you want to add before we move forward?
No, unless you've got any more thoughts on it.
No, nothing else with it. I think the thing with it is it just kind of does what it needs to do, but I really hope it gets a lift on the road to WrestleMania. I'm not excited by it, but let's move forward. We then obviously had this match between Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax with Naomi and Lana. Shayna and Nia are joined this week by Reginald. He's here on Raw this week. The storyline's obviously continuing. I'll give WWE credit. There was continuity. They carried it on from SmackDown. This is obviously a long-awaited title shot. Naomi and Lana have been due this title shot for weeks. This match obviously was okay in parts. Reginald was involved in the finish. Nia Jax obviously gets the pinfall, and then Nia Jax carries Reginald over his shoulder. Before I give you my thoughts, you can go first, Steve. I want to hear your thoughts first.
Well, I mean, it's good to see that Reginald has a next part of the storyline. I mean, that's something of a benefit. Now, I like Reginald because Reginald, you can see that he is quite good when it comes to like the athleticism side and like jumping around the ring. His mannerisms of what he does and what he's told to do, he executes very well. The problem is that he's been involved with everything going on a SmackDown women's division, and now he's been brought over to Raw's women's division. And I mean, this match, it was a match that's been built for Lana and Naomi for quite a while. It's good to see we finally got that match because they've had to wait time for it. But again, the story of the match is Reginald. And I mean, WWE did like a video package before this about, supporting Women's Day and all that sort of stuff, and literally sort of bigging up the empowerment of women. And then their women's match that follows that is based around Reginald, which for me just completely counteracts what they've tried to do a few minutes earlier. So for me, really, I look at it and say, from that perspective, it's awful. But in another way, as it's a continuation of the storyline, we know Reginald is going to be back in the Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair storyline, probably somewhere, certainly with Nia Jax in the tag team championship match anyway. It makes sense. But, I mean, the placement of all of this on this show just really didn't work for me.
I think the thing with it is this match has also been building since the day after the Royal Rumble. And you look at it like there was no chance really of Lana winning with Naomi. There was no chance of winning this match because of what they announced at Fastlane, which kind of meant there was no point to the match. But I get it. I think the problem I have with Reginald more than anything is this guy can't do any violence. They're not allowed violence on women. So he's totally, utterly sort of a spare part really in this. So I get that he's a bit of a tool, and this lot, he's a great kind of third wheel, if that makes sense. But I just thought it's kind of, it just didn't really sort of hype me up this match. I didn't really have any excitement for it. I thought it would have been far better because Naomi's a really good worker, so I was surprised. It's just interesting to see him go back to this Lana storyline every so often, almost like it's something they can go back to, and everyone's gonna be excited, really. That's my opinion. If you got anything else you want to add?
I really hope it's the end of the storyline. I mean, like we said there, Lana before Survivor Series was going through so many tables each and every week, and it's been building to this point. We finally had the blow-off match. Let's just leave it there. Let's just move on.
Definitely. We then obviously had this random backstage segment. We got Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke there with Sarah Schreiber. Rose and Brooke basically argued about sort of who's going to win the women's title. Charlotte Flair then turns up, and it just kind of ends up with them just arguing. So Charlotte Flair was on the show, yet she didn't have a match, which I can't explain. But this was just kind of a needed segment just to get Charlotte over, really. What was your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, it was a needless segment, but what I would say is that hopefully something beneficial will come from it, because Asuka is currently out injured, and obviously someone wants to get their place at WrestleMania to take on Asuka. This is a great opportunity to use Fastlane. This is a great opportunity to get a number one contenders match. You've got Charlotte, you've got Dana Brooke, you've got Mandy Rose, and as well, if you look on Raw Talk this week, Peyton Royce gives a it was so heartfelt, and you could tell it meant a lot to her, because she's saying, why am I sitting on the sidelines? Why am I watching people every week? I moved over from Australia to a country I don't even know to follow my dream, and I'm here sitting watching other people do it. There was something really that made me connect with this, of that sort of promo talk that she had, and you could see she was welling up, she was getting emotional. It meant something to her. I don't see why we couldn't have these four in a fatal four-way. Hell, let's get Nikki Cross in there, make it a five-way, maybe even a six-way, because honestly, we should use a match here to build up a number one contender for WrestleMania. That's my perspective of what this should come from. But more than likely, Charlotte's just going to beat people off one by one each and every week until we get to WrestleMania.
100%. I think the six-pack challenge you said is a great shout. I think it would be really, really kind of good. But I agree, Peyton Royce's promo after was excellent, sort of more talk. But yeah, I get it. At least Charlotte was on the show, I guess, in that respect, because she's probably going to be going into WrestleMania as either the number one contender or the champion. So it kind of makes sense. It's just weird that they have her on this show, yet they couldn't do a match with when they had Braun and Shane for 10 minutes at a time. It's just holes like that really kind of frustrate me. Have you got anything else you want to add before you get to this explosive main event?
No, but I agree with you. I think a lot of this show, was used for a lot of the lengthy segments, and they could have filled in with another match or two and getting more people on the card.
100%. So let's get to this kind of main event. So this is Randy Orton versus AJ Styles. Really, really good match. Until it got a bit silly, it was really, really kind of good. So what kind of happens in the end is it's very competitive. You never know who's going to kind of win. But then next thing you know, we get kind of Alexa Bliss on the screen, like behind me. She appears, and Randy's obviously looking really kind of angry. Next thing you know, we get all the explosions from Sunday's AEW show behind me, and it was an explosive kind of end. There was enough promo there that it was replica of Kane. That's where all the budget went from AEW. There you go, Tony Khan, it's there. And then obviously what it means, the best thing of all about this I found was Randy Orton was shell-shocked, but he's faced Kane hundreds of times before, and it was that same pro, yet he's shell-shocked to this reaction. It ends up with kind of AJ Styles getting the win. Randy Orton then does his Papa Shango impressions, puking guts again, and the show kind of goes off the air with Alexa Bliss laughing at him. What was your kind of thoughts of the match and the angle?
The thing is that, like you said, the match was fine, the match was good, but you knew something wasn't going to go quite right. So I was kind of just waiting for the inevitable. I do love how, like, Randy can just be he can be very salty. He can be a bit of a prick sometimes. Let's just say it as it is. I love the fact that when he went to hit that DDT and he blew that kiss at Omos, you could just see it's typical Randy Orton sort of style of that sort of arrogance that he's got getting over. But he gets his comeuppance. And of course, yes, we are building towards Orton and Fiend at WrestleMania, but the way that we're doing it, it's, again, this supernatural stuff that I'm just not a fan of. The sort of Papa Shango stuff I could do without. But AJ Styles picked up the victory, and one person that comes up with real credibility from this is AJ Styles, because the intelligent AJ doesn't have a place at WrestleMania right now. He's not got anywhere fitted in on the card, but he looked around Orton this week and said, that is a multi-time world champion. I can get myself a bit of a rub here. I can get myself higher up the card by beating him in a match while he is arguably at a vulnerable stage. And AJ took full opportunity, got the victory. So from that, AJ Styles comes out in glory. But for a finish of Raw, for me as a viewer, I didn't enjoy it.
I just think the thing with it, it's the same thing week on week. Obviously, earlier in the show, we had this 10-minute Randy Orton Alexa flashback. They've done a fair good job of keeping the Fiend off TV, as we said last week. But the way that it's repetitive, she's got this music box, she's kind of winding it. We guess the Fiend's going to pop out of it. But for me, based on last week where we had two Randy Ortons, this is just getting really, really kind of silly. They're really clutching on now. I think it's about time the Fiend comes back. I think week on week, this is making Randy Orton sort of look like just a comedy act. And I think the thing with it, he had such a good year last year where he beat people such as Edge, and he obviously done other great things where he was even the world champion by beating Drew McIntyre, one of the rare people that beat Drew. I think this is just huge, just such a waste of time, really. I get that this is Kane and Undertaker of 2021. I get that. It's all about the slow build, but to have the same thing week on week. And the problem is, while this is going on week on week, we're not getting Alexa in the ring. The Alexa character's kind of been stuck in this, which is a real shame because she's a really good addition to the women's division, I think. What's your kind of thoughts, Steve?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I want to see Bliss involved in the ring, and I'm not in a supernatural way. I want to see her actually doing what she does best. There's so many great feuds that a Bliss could be having right now. You mentioned about a six-pack challenge idea earlier. Wouldn't it be great even just see Bliss versus Charlotte Flair in a one-on-one match? Winner gets to WrestleMania. That would be awesome. We've only seen it at Survivor Series 2017. They faced one-on-one before. That would be a fun feud to watch. Yeah, I mean, as you said, 80% of this rivalry between The Fiend and Bliss and Randy Orton has been video packages from previous weeks. They're using that to build up a minute or two to build up the next part of the story. It's very supernatural. Like you said, it's a bit childish and silly. I'm looking forward to where we can all move forward into different directions. Like you said, The Fiend needs to come back. I still have a feeling Fastlane could be that destination, but we need to build some matches to get there first. We're not quite there yet.
Definitely. I think the thing with it is, it's just one of the things where, because it's going on so long, it's really kind of hard to really get invested in it. But when we get this Firefly Funhouse match, which no doubt I'm sure the Fiend's probably going to win, hopefully Randy Orton will go off TV for a bit and then he can come back and then restart the good work he did last year. Have you got anything else you want to add before we get to the final thoughts and score of Raw, Steve?
No, I'm ready for the final thoughts.
Okay, no problem. So my kind of final thoughts of the show, it was a very average kind of show. The only positive really I can take out of it was there was some great in-ring action. The Drew McIntyre Sheamus match was incredible. Probably last year's champions, refreshing. And I think we've got some big matches for next week, but there was a lot of filler on this show that kind of made it hard to watch at times. I kind of got through the show and I haven't enjoyed it as much as recent weeks. What was your kind of final thought, Steve, before we score it?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same for you. The first hour of Raw I quite enjoyed. I thought the presentation of Lashley was fantastic. Drew and Sheamus was really good. But then you go to the flip side and there was a lot of awful things in there as well. Shane and Braun, not very good. I'm not into what's going on with the supernatural stuff to close the show. But they were building to some championship matches, which arguably, yes, is a bit of filler, but they need to put the groundwork in. They've announced these matches ahead of time. Let's hope WWE doesn't do what they did this week and scrap one of them last minute without explanation, because we was supposed to get a championship celebration to kick off the show with Bobby Lashley this week, which you didn't quite get.
Yeah, definitely. If I was going to give this a score this week, kind of out of 10, I'm going to go for 5 out of 10. It really didn't connect for me. I think we're now going into sort of Fastlane, and it's just there wasn't enough built for Fastlane or WrestleMania. It's just very much it was this filler week on week. We had quite a few rematches. There's nothing wrong with that. The biggest mistake I think they made is they had their world champion open the show like in a match, which I think you should have delayed the Lashley match until the end of the show. Really, I think Lashley's your world champion. He was seen in the first hour, but then he's not seen throughout the rest of the show for me, which is a big mistake. What's your kind of final score, Steve?
Yeah, I agree with some of the points you make there. I'm going to go for a 5.5 out of 10 because I do think there were some good things. The things that were good, but the things that were bad were bad. And like you said as well, Damien Priest not on this show. Bad Bunny was announced that he's going to be performing at the Grammys, which is great for him. But of course, it just goes to show what WWE thinks of Damien Priest when Bad Bunny isn't around, which is not a good sign to see, unfortunately.
Definitely. Have you got anything else you want to add before we talk about Fastlane quickly?
No, let's move on to Fastlane, my friend.
Okay, so we've got Fastlane. Fastlane's obviously 12 days away. We've only got a couple of matches. What's your kind of thoughts overall, the way they're building this card? Are you a fan of this, or do you think we've hit a roadblock literally with this card, and it's one where they've got no real idea what they're doing? It just, you can't really get behind this, get interested in this card, because we're yet to have world title matches really on either brand other than Roman and Daniel, basically. That's the only thing we've got so far, probably.
Yeah, no, I think the idea of roadblock, I think, was a very key word. I also would use speed bump.
Yeah.
Literally, it's something that just stops us on the road to Mania when we don't need it. This show is not important. Let's just cut it and say how it is. WWE have not built really any matches for this, and it's getting to the point that I actually wonder if Raw is going to be involved at all on Fastlane. I'm quite happy for this to be a SmackDown, and in fact, I'm happy this to be a 4 or 5 match show, like an old In Your House back in the day. Let's just make this a 2-hour show, get the 1 or 2 important things you need to do and establish from this show for WrestleMania. That's all that's needed. No filler. It looks like we're not getting like the United States Championship, Raw Tag Championships. They're going to be on Raw, so I don't know what matches we're going to get additioned at this point for the show, but looking at, like you said, Daniel Bryan, Roman Reigns, that'll be a great match. That'll be really good to see, and that'll probably build something towards WrestleMania. I'm starting to actually wonder, yes, Reigns will retain, but I'm starting to think we could get a triple threat match. I wonder if Edge does something to cost Daniel Bryan in this match, and that way it leads to the triple threat match. With obviously the women's match, Reginald's probably going to play a part. I think he's still going to be aligned with Sasha Banks. There's something to actually take that further on to WrestleMania. Even if the storylines aren't great, there is development. With the other stuff, perhaps like if the Fiend comes back, for example, on this show to confront Randy Orton, that would be a big thing to do. If you have Drew and Sheamus, that would be quite cool to see. Other than that, I don't think you need much. Let's just get Fastlane out of the way. And in future years, let's not waste time on having a pay-per-view like this that doesn't really add much, because WrestleMania is being affected in the build by this show. It is in the way. I don't know if you agree with me.
100%. I think the thing is, you make some excellent suggestions. From an in-ring perspective, the matches we've got are going to be good fun. 100%. I think they'll be decent. I think the problem I have with it is you've not got Lashley with anybody. Lashley is your world champion now. You haven't even organised a match this week on Raw. Or you could obviously do him versus Miz again. You could do him versus Drew versus Sheamus. You could do that as a triple threat potentially. But I just think they neglect the belts, and the fact I know Oscar's been injured, but there's nothing announced. I think the problem with it, it's very hard to get invested. It was the same at Elimination Chamber last month, where we didn't have any matches announced. We were very short of matches going into it, and it's a lottery to what you get on the show, which it's very hard to really get invested in the pay-per-view and really want to sort of purchase it and buy it when we don't know what we're going to get, or even watch it on the network when we don't know what we're going to get, really. It's a shame, really. For me, I'd like to see them go back to just WrestleMania and Royal Rumble together, and then a break between both, and then build up WrestleMania. I think that'd be far better. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against it. I mean, the thing is, I did actually get a question about a pay-per-view schedule on my Q&A the other day, and I did say that I like Elimination Chamber because it fills in the gaps of what's not completed for WrestleMania. But, you have a Rumble winner that declares themselves for a champion. Well, there's another side of it where you need to get a number one contender or establish that champion is still the champion going into WrestleMania. So that sort of stuff, I'm sort of okay with Elimination Chamber, but then you should get about a good 6 to 7 weeks solid build then from that show to WrestleMania, where there's no pay-per-views in between. For me, that just doesn't help things. And I think it does get in the way. I just don't see the point of it.
I think the thing with it is, I guess we're going to be surprised, but they're going to have to do a lot of match building on SmackDown. We've got 2 more SmackDowns and 1 more Raw. That's an awful lot to build on Raw, isn't it, next week, to get the pay-per-view lined out almost. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, it is. And I imagine Peacock. Sorry, George, I missed that last question.
I was going to say, I heard that you said about Peacock. Considering this is the first pay-per-view on Peacock, you'd have thought WWE would have it sort of stat, but it's not the case, is it?
No, I'm saying that I don't think they'd be best pleased by it personally, Peacock. All this big change with the WWE network, especially for the American market, and they're not giving people a need to go and actually get over there and see that show. But hey, things can change. Like you said, there's still 2 SmackDowns, there's still 1 Raw. Maybe they will put a big match or 2 on this that will get people invested.
100%. Yeah, thank you very much for coming on, Steve. It's been great to have your opinion. Just before we end the video, please tell everybody about what you got coming on your channel. It's been a great fun to have you on here again.
It's great to be on here as always. Thank you very much. And of course, everyone subscribe to Jonesy Chats Wrestling. Please make sure he gets to those subs as quick as possible because he does really deserve them. A lot of hard work. I really enjoy your Revolution review, by the way. So if people haven't seen it, make sure to go and check it out. But SCW this week, yeah, I mean, it'll be a bit calmer on the channel this week. I've done a lot of videos recently, so I'm giving people a chance to catch up on what to see. Revolution review is on my channel. NXT preview for this week is already on the channel. But what will be coming also is Impact Wrestling. No sacrifices this week. I will be doing predictions for that as well. More Q&As on the way also. So yeah, lots of reasons to go and check out the channel.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for coming on, Steve. This has been Jonesy Chats Wrestling, joined by Steve from SCW. If you made it to the end of the video, give yourself a pat on the back. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up. If you agree or disagree with the comments we've said on the video, please leave them below what you think. Let me know your thoughts of Raw. Let me know what you think going into Fastlane. Are you excited? Are you not excited? And just let me know overall what you thought of the video. And if you've enjoyed the video, please give us a thumbs up and a subscribe. But this has been Jonesy Chats Wrestling, joined by Steve from SCW. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for watching.